Hello and welcome to episode 48 and the final episode of Zero Shot. I'm Praveen Gopalkrishnan, your co host, and I have my other two co hosts with me after a long time. Welcome, Rohin.
Hello, Praveen Gopalkrishnan. This is Rohin Dharmakumar, your other co-host.
And of course, Brady, who's joining us this time, not from Hong Kong, but from Chiang Mai.
Correct. I've been here for a couple weeks because a friend was getting married. So there were festivities and it was fun.
Were you also in mourning, Brady, now that we are ending Zero Shot?
A little bit, but I'm also looking forward to new things we can do.
Okay, I guess we'll have to start by talking about why we are ending Zero Shot. We'll take like maybe a few minutes and talk about that. We've been around for like 48 episodes, and in the last 48 episodes, we've covered a whole bunch of things.
I think we began when AI adoption in enterprises and enterprises especially and among knowledge professionals started skyrocketing. And I think thanks largely to the first of the Opus models that came out from Anthropic. So that was I think, the marker for Anthropic's meteoric rise and, of course, the wider adoption of AI models inside knowledge work.
And I guess we started to use it much more ourselves as well. Not just the three of us, but some other team members within the Ken as well. So I guess part of this program of Zero Shot was also like us figuring out what we're trying to do with AI and how we're trying to do it. So it's been kind of interesting for me.
So what is its end mark? So if its beginning coincides with us intersecting AI models at work in various ways, what do you think, if we had to reverse read the end of Zero Shot, what does that mean for our stages with respect to AI?
Yeah, I mean, I remember like when we first started Zero Shot, the three of us tried to articulate our respective niche within the program. And what I said was, I feel like AI is just more software and it'll kind of become the norm. It'll just become something that, everybody or almost everybody needs to use on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And I feel like, the end of Zero Shot is kind of a spread of that. Like that's being more of the norm for more people. I mean, is there like a single workday where either of you don't use Claude?
Yes, there are single work days definitely where I don't use Claude.
Same for me.
And there was a sustained period after that Fable trick that they pulled where I think for some weeks, I think I stopped using
Oh, wow.
Claude. But by and large, yeah, I mean, I would say like 80% of the days I do end up using Claude.
I do remember, Brady, when we started, you basically drew the comparison that AI is going to become like cloud, where you say that cloud is something that when it came in the beginning, it felt very novel, but after a while, cloud sort of like comes into the background of every product that you use, and you don't really think about it in very forward terms. It's just there. It's an infrastructural layer.
So cloud is no longer novel and cloud is also no longer novel. Sorry, not sorry.
Dad jokes. Our listeners will certainly not miss that. Okay, but I will just ask one last question about Zero Shot. For the two of you, what's your favorite memory and episode of Zero Shot? And we'll just talk about that before we talk about what's happening next.
Favorite memory, favorite episode. It's hard to pick one, but I think there's one that stands out. And maybe it's because it's a more recent episode, but with Tanmay Gopal from Hasura.
Yeah.
He was the one who really like converted me within the hour, at least like 80%. Like I felt like, I was convinced that, this was a product that I really, really, really want to use or at least try out and see how much of myself I can replace, basically. So yeah, that was one that stood out for me.
Yeah, I think for our listeners, I'll say that is episode number 44, where we had Tanmay from of Hasura. Of course, now he has PromQL. It is a great conversation. That was going to be my answer too, but I'll change my answer. My favorite episodes were actually the ones, surprisingly, the ones that Rohin led, where he put both of us on a very difficult position and started asking questions, and felt like a very felt like a therapy session where you're starting to realize at the end of the session, oh, there is so much that we should do, should not do. I thought those are my favorites.
So I don't have
Of course, you don't.
favorites, but I will use this moment to talk about the arc of how our episodes changed from the time that we started or not. Because when we started, these episodes were very different. We would bring multiple topics. It was each episode would be a discussion about a news item and what it really means and what it really hides, etc. Over time, I think we started focusing on making it sharper, and in two ways. One, instead of covering multiple topics, we said let's do one topic in depth. And then subsequently, we said it's not even a topic, it should ideally be a company or a person based out of India or China, which is where I think, like India, of course, because that's where the Ken is, China, of course, because that's where Brady has a lot of sources in, and that which is actually the second pole of AI development globally. So, some of my favorite episodes are when we started getting people to come in and we started focusing and turning the lens on specific companies. Like, for example, will Sarvam be to AI what PhonePe became for UPI? No, right? Or when we brought in a trilegal partner to talk about how vibe coding lawyers would end up faring, or we started talking about AI and the end of SaaS playbooks. I think that's when, in at least to me, Zero Shot podcast went from being uh, abstract, or not abstract, but discussion around the news, to starting to become more focused around usage and real companies and real people. So that's when, for me personally, that was like a fork in the road, and we started going towards that side. And once we did, I sort of it brought us here. It was inevitable. Once we went down that path, we start talking about companies. Once we start talking about companies, then we're talking about, okay, then it's not just enough to talk about what's happening now. We got to figure out what will happen 6 months from now, 12 months from now. Once we started doing that, then we realized, wait a minute, then this concentration that we are like, I mean, if in many ways, if you bookend Zero Shot, it started when Anthropic started to break out and become more popular, and it's ending when Anthropic is like, I
Losing.
mean, yeah, the most recent controversy over on Twitter, I refuse to call it X, is Dario Amodai refuting a bunch of allegations, saying that he's spoken to multiple people where he says that there will only be one private company left in the world, and that will be Anthropic, right? And now we're at this stage where we started when Anthropic started breaking out, and now we're in this stage where the constant, like the world, literally, from Microsoft CEO to Facebook slash Meta CEO to the US government, like, parts of the US government, defense establishment, David Sachs, etc., are all on the other side of, no, we cannot allow any one company to become holier than thou and have this level of control. So I think that, for me, is the arc of these 48 podcast episodes, and if I'm not mistaken, 49 newsletter editions, right?
Correct.
And so if we were to kind of, like, look ahead and say, what does it mean now? So I would say, and that's in many ways how it ended, right? Like, it ended with intelligence independence, which was an event which in some senses came out of the direction that Zero Shot took, where we came to the realization that, look, this is too much concentration. We need to have methods, systems, approaches as individuals, startups, nation states, to not end up being dominated by one or two. Mostly when we say one or two, it's effectively come down to one because of how brilliantly Sam Altman and OpenAI have managed to shoot themselves in the foot over the years. But it's anthropic really now, right?
Hmm.
So intelligence independence is really that. It's the other end of this thing, saying that look, the breakout is now the controller, and we all need to figure out a way to commoditize models instead of concentrating them and have a multitude of models working for us rather than us working for a single model. That's the long arc for me.
We'll touch on intelligence independence very briefly, but before that, I want to ask Brady, because I think, Brady, how do you see the arc from a China perspective? Because I was thinking about this, and he's right, which is that we started off at a time when Anthropic was just breaking out, and we're ending it at a point when it's pretty clear that everything has soured around Anthropic. But I feel like in some sense it has reversed with China. We started at a time, if you remember, at the height of the tariff wars and everything else, where all the chips and everything was like locked down away from China, and it felt like, okay, China is now has to figure something out. And it feels like we are ending it at a point where they're probably extremely strong. Open weight models are now very clear right now that they are going to like pose a serious challenge, become great. Robotics and whatever China has done, we've done a few episodes on that. But I'm just curious, how do you see the arc from your standpoint?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when we started, I was actually kind of worried that the China angle might not connect with our listeners and readers so much, because when I talk about it with, say, US based people who don't actively track AI, there is already a disconnect there, even though like the specter of it is so commonly in the broader narrative, right? So when we started to cover China stuff, for me the surprising thing was how many people would write in to ask more questions, or even like make suggestions about stuff they wanted to hear about. So that made me like more comfortable with exploring things like, how the open source culture from like 20 years ago shaped the way the AI industry is right now in China. Like that itself feels like it needs so much context. But once we saw that there was sufficient interest, like, why not try an episode on that? Or even like another episode where I had Kendra Schaefer, who has been tracking tech policy in China for almost 2 decades, right? Again, like you would think that needs so much context, but that actually became, like kind of a popular episode, at least in terms of the feedback I got. So, yeah, the arc was more comfortable than I thought it would be in some way. So I really appreciate that.
Hmm. Um, I think it was like a great run. From an India perspective, I'll just say that we started at a point where there were a lot of questions about India and what it is going to do with AI, and it felt like it was going to be outmaneuvered on every level. I wouldn't end by saying that we are at a point where that's resolved, but I feel like we are ending it at a point where there is a different way of looking at it from an India perspective. And so for this episode, I'll just end with something that Rohin wrote last Saturday, which was the final column of Zero Shot that is titled "This is the End." Quote, "We are not ending Zero Shot because AI got boring. Far from it. We are doing it because mere analysis has stopped being enough. Every week, as we explained what happened, each of us felt the sting of the unanswered question. So, what should I actually do about it? Watching the field is not the same as taking charge of your place in it. That gap started to bother me more than any single launch. It led us at the Ken directly to our last event, Intelligence Independence. Ever since we wrapped that event 2 weeks ago, I've been thinking that the theme isn't something that gets done with just one event. It needs to be an ongoing project. That project will be called Intelligence Independence." So, Rohin, I know you're still figuring this out. We are all figuring this out. But maybe you can take like a couple of minutes and tell us about Intelligence Independence. How did we get here?
A lot of the products at the Ken, including Zero Shot, sit at the intersection of what we as journalists are observing in the world and reporting on it. That's circle one, if you think of it as a Venn diagram. Circle two is what we as professionals are experiencing in our own lives every single day. And by the way, the media sector is one of the highest impacted slash users of AI globally. So there's a significant amount of AI usage that happens in our sector and in our work as well. We don't use AI to write stories or report, etc. But like there's an incredible amount of other things that happen at the Ken as well. So that's circle 2. And circle 3 is, I think, as both entrepreneurs and journalists, we're also looking at what is it that our subscribers, readers, listeners are getting affected by, and what are they going to be finding useful, valuable, etc. So the products at the Ken that end up staying around for a long time, those that fit cleanly into the intersection of these three, right? What's happening in the world, which is interesting. What is it that people or journalists are doing, which is interesting. And what is it that subscribers or readers or listeners want, which is interesting. And I think once you are in that zone, it's like the reverse Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle kind of sucks you down and and kills you. This is it sucks you in, and then it like guides you, right? So it's like the reverse Bermuda Triangle. It then has a certain momentum of its own, and then it takes you places where, like in our case, it became apparent that look, it's not enough. We're past the age where we say, here's how to use this AI, here's how to write prompts, here's why you're doing X all wrong, right? Like we didn't want to do any of that, right? Instead, we want to look at where things are headed, and this certain level of, I think, mix of hope and ambition combined with anxiety and despair, and how do you resolve it. That's how intelligence independence came about. And when we did the event, it was very clear that look, I mean, there's a lot that needs to be covered, done, etc., at the level of professionals, organizations, and countries, and not enough of it is getting done. And that's what we should be focusing on. So therefore, zero shot the container no longer fits that purpose. And since we did the event, which was called Intelligence Independence, it became very clear. And from a lot of the people who wanted to attend or who actually came and attended and subsequently wrote to us, it became clear that, look, this shouldn't be something that you do one event around and stop. Instead, continue, because its need hasn't gone away. If anything, it's only going to become more acute as time progresses. So that's what we want to do with intelligence independence. A valid question, what exactly is it going to be? But in the tradition of all things at the Ken, we'll figure it out as we go along, because we have access to subscribers and listeners, and I'm sure you will tell us. In fact, if you're listening to this episode, we will link to a survey in the show notes which allows you to tell us, what do you want intelligence independence to be? I haven't created that survey yet, but I'm fairly sure that by the time Praveen and Rajiv process this episode and publish it, I will have, right? Again, in the tradition of the Ken, we'll create it when it needs to be created.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Tell us about what you want intelligence independence to be. This has been a great run. Rohin, Brady, I had a lot of fun. And here's to more experiments and more fun. And of course, to intelligence independence as well.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, reading, and indulging. I hope you enjoyed my jokes, no matter what Praveen says.
Sure.
And we'll be back soon. In the immortal words of Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Yes.
I'll be back.
Yeah, thanks everybody for supporting Zero Shot. Keep the questions coming. I'm sure if I have answers, you'll hear from me. Thanks again.
Thanks again, and see you on the other side.
That was Zero Shot, the Ken's weekly podcast on the biggest developments in artificial intelligence. Our hosts and commentators are Praveen Gopalkrishnan, Rohin Dharmakumar, and me, Brady Ng. Our sound engineer is Rajiv CN, who makes everything sound spectacular. Don't miss our Zero Shot columns, which are published every Saturday. We'll be back with more for this podcast next week.